This is my true story. 10 years ago, my own son left me at a shelter like I was nothing. He said he'd come back in a week, but he never did. I waited on a cold bed with my small bag and a heart that felt even smaller. I thought the pain would kill me. But yesterday, something happened that shook me more than the day he abandoned me. I saw him outside my restaurant, begging, dirty, trembling, broken. And what I did next surprised even me. Before I tell you, tell me where you're watching from, and please subscribe so my stories can reach more people. 10 years ago, I sat in my son's car thinking he was taking me to his home. He told me he wanted me close, that he wanted to take care of me. I believed him because he was my son, my blood, the child I raised with tired hands and empty pockets. But the moment we turned onto that long road toward the shelter, something inside me felt wrong. He wouldn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the road, tight and cold, like a man forcing himself through an ugly job. When we pulled up to the building, my stomach dropped. I asked him why we were there, but he didn't answer. He just grabbed my bag, placed it on the sidewalk, and told me to stay here for a week. A week that never came. A week that turned into months. A week that turned into years. I watched his car drive away, slow at first, then faster, then gone. I told myself he'd return after work. Then I told myself he'd return after the weekend. Then I told myself he'd return after the holidays. But he didn't return at all. I sat on that shelter bed feeling emptier than I ever had in my life. I remembered the nights I worked double shifts just so he could eat. The mornings I walked miles to get him to school. The times I went hungry so he wouldn't feel shame. And now here I was, left like forgotten luggage, dropped off by the only person I had in this world. I kept replaying the moment he drove away, wondering what I did wrong. I wondered if I had been too strict, too soft, too poor, too tired. I blamed myself for his cold heart. The shelter staff told me it wasn't my fault, but they didn't know him the way I did. They didn't know the boy who used to run to me when he was scared, who hugged my leg and said he loved me. That boy was long gone, replaced by a man who looked at me like I was in his way. Days passed, then weeks, then months. No calls, no letters, no footsteps outside my door. I waited anyway, every day sitting near the entrance, thinking maybe he'd realize what he had done. But he never did. One afternoon I heard someone say, he took his father's savings, bought a new apartment, and something in me cracked. He hadn't left me because he was overwhelmed. He left me because life was easier without me. He left me because money meant more to him than blood. He left me because I was no longer useful. I felt the kind of pain you don't scream about, the kind that sinks into your bones and stays there. The nights were the worst. I lay on the shelter bed listening to other men crying quietly in the dark, each carrying their own story of being thrown away by family. I became one of them. I became a man with no home, no love, no son waiting for him. I was just another old man in a room full of broken fathers, but I refused to die there. I refused to let the betrayal swallow me whole. I told myself if my own son could throw me away, then I had to learn how to hold myself up. So I got up. I swept floors. I washed dishes. I carried boxes. I worked small jobs the world ignored. Every day I built myself up again piece by piece because no one else would. And as I worked, I learned something important. Sometimes it's not the world that breaks you. Sometimes it's the people you love most. The abandonment wasn't just a moment. It was a wound that stayed open for years. It was a memory that lived in every breath. It was the first chapter of a story I would carry forever, but it wasn't the last. Because even though my son drove me to that shelter and left me behind like trash, he didn't bury me. I found a way to stand again, and the world would soon see the man he tried to throw away. The years that followed felt like slow punishment, the kind that doesn't hit all at once, but sinks into you day after day. Life in the shelter was cold, but it was never as cold as the silence from my son. Every morning I woke up to the sound of shuffling feet, coughing men, and the heavy air of people who had nowhere else to go. I stared at the ceiling and waited for a call that never came. I kept my phone close, even when the battery barely lasted an hour. I checked it over and over, like a habit I couldn't kill. Nothing. Not a single message. Not a single, "Are you okay?" Not even a mistake call. It was like I had been erased from his world. I watched men around me talk about their families. Some were bitter, some were angry, some still hoped their children would visit. I never told them my story because the truth embarrassed me. I felt ashamed that the son I raised chose to remove me from his life so easily. I felt weak, like I had failed not just as a father, but as a man. I told myself he would come one day. Maybe he'd feel guilt. Maybe he'd remember the things I did for him. But as the months turned into years, hope became something painful to hold. It hurt more to hope than to accept the truth. He wasn't coming back. He took my savings before dropping me off. All the money I kept for my old age, gone. My house too, sold under my name. I didn't even fight it because I didn't have the strength. Then I was tired. My heart felt bruised. My bones ached from years of work. I walked into that shelter as a father, but I became a man starting from zero. I washed dishes in the communal kitchen. I swept floors. I cleaned bathrooms. I took any job I could, even the ones people turned away from. I told myself each small task was a step away from the pain he caused. Some nights, the memories kept me awake. The day I taught him to ride a bike. The time I stayed up all night helping him study for his exams. The mornings I carried him on my shoulders because he liked to feel tall. Those memories used to warm me, but in the shelter they cut deep. They reminded me that the boy I loved grew into a man who could abandon me in a place where people waited to die. I tried to understand how a heart can change like that, how a child raised with love can turn into someone who cares only for comfort and money. I asked myself what corrupted him: greed, pride, or the simple belief that I had become a burden. As more time passed, something inside me hardened. Not bitterness, not revenge, just understanding. I realized waiting for him was like waiting for rain in the desert. It wasn't coming. And even if it did, it wouldn't be enough to grow anything. So I stopped checking my phone. I stopped sitting near the shelter entrance, hoping to see his face. I stopped telling myself stories about him realizing his mistake. I let the hope die because I needed to live. I began saving small amounts of money from every tiny job I took. Pennies, dollars, whatever I could manage. People didn't see it, but inside me a seed of stubborn strength grew. If my own son didn't think I was worth keeping, then I would prove to myself that I was. I learned to cook in the shelter kitchen, using leftovers, scraps, anything I could turn into a meal. People began to praise the food. They said it made them feel warm. Those words meant more to me than anything my son ever said as an adult. Every morning I walked out of the shelter doors with a broom in hand or a cleaning rag in my pocket, but I walked out with purpose. I wasn't rebuilding for him. I wasn't rebuilding to be accepted by anyone. I was rebuilding because I had one thing left: myself. And even though life had beaten me down, I wasn't going to stay on the ground. The silent years took everything from me: my home, my son, my pride. But they gave me something too. They gave me the strength to start again. They taught me that a man can be thrown away and still rise. And I rose slowly, painfully, quietly, until the world began to notice. These years broke me, but they also built me in a way my son never could. The rise didn't happen fast. It didn't happen with luck. It happened because I was tired of being treated like a man who had no value. I started with the only thing I had. My hands. I washed dishes in the shelter kitchen until my fingers cracked. I cooked leftover food for the men who had nobody. They said my cooking reminded them of home, of better days, of mothers and grandmothers long gone. Their words lit something inside me. I realized the world had taken everything from me except one thing: the skill to feed people. So when a small street stall went up for sale, I used every dollar I saved and bought it. It wasn't much: a rusted table, an old stove, and a spot on a noisy street. But it was more mine than anything I had in years. The first morning I opened that stall, I felt fear sitting in my chest like a stone. I cooked simple dishes, the same ones I made for my son when he was small. At first, people walked past me like I didn't exist, just another old man trying to stay alive. But then one customer came, then two, then five. They said my food tasted honest, warm, real. In a world full of fake smiles and expensive plates, people wanted something simple. They wanted something made by hands that had known pain. Little by little, the stall grew. I worked from sunrise to midnight, sweating, coughing, trembling sometimes from exhaustion, but I refused to stop. I had been thrown away once. I wouldn't let life throw me away again. People began lining up, asking for the old man's stew, the old man's fried rice, the old man's bread. Word spread faster than I expected. Taxi drivers, students, workers, all kinds of people came to eat. They didn't know my story. They didn't know I slept in a shelter for years. They just knew the food fed their stomachs and their hearts. One day, a businessman approached me. He said he wanted to help me expand. I didn't trust him at first. Life had taught me that trust can break bones, but he didn't want my money. He wanted my cooking. He offered me an empty space in a small building. I used every bit of courage I had left and opened a cafe. It was small, only 4 tables and a tiny kitchen, but to me, it felt like a palace. I hung no photos on the walls. I kept no memories there. I worked quietly, served customers, washed dishes, closed late, opened early. And the cafe grew. People loved the food. They loved my story, even though I never told the whole truth. They loved the warmth I put into every plate, because that warmth came from suffering. Soon the cafe wasn't enough. Lines wrapped around the block. People begged me to open another location. I saved every dollar, every tip, every coin. And after years of grinding, I opened a full restaurant. When I walked inside for the first time, the lights bright, the tables shining, the smell of fresh food filling the air, I felt something I thought I'd never feel again. Pride, real pride. Not pride in a son who abandoned me. Pride in myself, in my work, in every step I took from the shelter to this place. People shook my hand. They called me Sir, Chef, Owner. Titles I never imagined I'd hear. Titles my son never gave me. Titles that came from strangers who valued me more than my own blood. I stood in that restaurant every day, not as a broken old man, but as someone who survived being discarded. Every plate that left my kitchen carried pieces of my past, pain, endurance, hunger, and the strength to rise again. I built something with the same hands my son rejected. I created a life he didn't think I deserved. And every time I locked the restaurant doors at night, I looked at the keys in my hand and remembered the moment he left me on that curb. He thought he ended my story. But all he did was push me into the chapter where I learned I didn't need him. My rise wasn't revenge. My rise was proof. A man can be abandoned, forgotten, betrayed, and still find a way to stand taller than before. Yesterday morning, I stepped outside my restaurant to check the deliveries like I always do. The air was cold, and the city was just waking up. I was thinking about the menu, the staff schedule, the new customers we expected. My mind was on business, not on the past. I had no idea that the past was sitting only a few feet away from me. As I walked toward the supply truck, I noticed a shape on the ground near the doorway, curled up, shivering, wrapped in dirty clothes that looked more like rags than anything made for a human being. At first, I thought it was just another homeless man trying to stay warm. I've seen many over the years, and my heart always softened for them because I used to be one. But something about this man felt different. His hands were trembling violently, his hair was matted and greasy, his shoes had holes, his face was buried in his arms like he wanted to hide from the world. I stepped closer, and his shoulders jerked like he was scared someone might kick him. I saw how thin he was. Bones pressing through the fabric, skin pale from hunger, breath weak from cold. My chest tightened without knowing why. I reached out, not touching him, just wanting to see if he was conscious. And then he lifted his head. For a moment, my whole world stopped moving. His eyes were empty, dark circles under them, the spark long gone. His cheeks were sunken, his lips cracked, his face dirty and tired. But even through all that ruin, I recognized him instantly. My son. The same son who drove me to a shelter and left me there like I was nothing. The same son who sold my house and took my savings. The same son who never called, never looked for me, never checked if I was alive. I felt the ground tilt under my feet. I gripped the wall because my legs wanted to give out. He looked at me with shock, as if he couldn't believe I was standing there, dressed well, healthy, strong, owning the restaurant he sat beside like a starving dog. For a second, he didn't say anything. He just stared, and I saw something inside his eyes break. Not pride, not anger, fear, real fear. The kind of fear a man feels when the truth finally catches up to him. His hands shook harder. His mouth opened like he wanted to apologize or explain or beg, but no words came out. He looked smaller than I ever remembered, smaller than when he was a child. Life had crushed him, the same life he thought he controlled when he left me behind. If someone had told me years ago that I would see my son in this condition, dirty, hungry, homeless, I would have said it was impossible. He loved comfort too much. He loved money too much. He loved power too much. But here he was, sitting in the shadows outside my door, not because he wanted to see me, but because the world had finally taken everything he tried to take from others. I felt anger rise in me for a moment, sharp and hot. Anger for the years he stole from me. Anger for the nights I cried alone. Anger for the father he threw away. But the anger faded as fast as it came. Because standing there, looking at him curled on my doorstep like a broken man, I realized something painful. He wasn't my enemy. He was a man destroyed by his own choices. A man who thought he could outrun the consequences of his greed. A man who threw away his father and ended up losing himself. I didn't move toward him. I didn't speak. I just watched him, my heart heavy, my mind full. My employees stood behind me, whispering, wondering who he was. They didn't know the story. They didn't know this was the same son who once told me I was a burden. They didn't know the man on the ground used to sleep in a warm bed while I slept on a shelter mattress. They didn't know the truth. But I did. And for the first time in 10 years, I looked at my son not as the boy I raised, but as the man he became. A man life had finally humbled. A man who now needed something he never gave. Mercy. He looked up at me with eyes that no longer carried pride, no longer carried the sharp, selfish glare he used to have. Instead, they were filled with something I had never seen from him before. Pure fear. Fear of me. Fear of himself. Fear of the life he had fallen into. When he realized I recognized him, his whole body shook. His lips moved like he wanted to say my name, but the sound wouldn't come out. His hands pressed against the ground as if he needed it to stop the world from spinning. For a moment, I saw my son as a child again, trembling after a nightmare, reaching for me, but this time, the nightmare was his own doing. He tried to stand, but his legs buckled. He grabbed the wall and pulled himself up, swaying, weak, starving. His clothes hung off him like they belonged to someone bigger. His hair was a mess of dirt and knots. He looked 20 years older than his age. When he finally managed to speak, his voice cracked in the middle, thin and broken. He whispered one word. Dad. And hearing that word after 10 years almost broke me in half. He used to say it with confidence, with entitlement, with the belief that I would always be there for him. But now he said it like a man drowning, reaching for anything that might keep him afloat. He told me he had nowhere to go, no one to help him. He said people crossed the street to avoid him. He said he hadn't eaten a real meal in 3 days. His hands trembled so hard he had to hold them against his stomach. His eyes kept filling with tears. He tried to blink away, but they fell anyway, sliding through the dirt on his cheeks. I stood there staring at him, remembering the day he drove away from the shelter without looking back, remembering how he took my savings and used them to decorate his apartment, remembering how he told people I was old, slow, useless. The same word, useless, that kept ringing in my ears for years. And now here he was, begging for mercy from the same man he abandoned. Life had taken everything from him. He said he lost his job first. Then his girlfriend left. Then he lost his apartment. Then his friends stopped answering his calls. He tried to borrow money from people, but no one trusted him anymore. He said he slept in alleyways, under bridges, on benches, anywhere he could collapse without being kicked awake. He said he hadn't seen his reflection in weeks because he was scared of what he might see. He kept wiping his face with shaking hands as if he could erase the years of mistakes he made. He looked at me with the kind of desperation that comes when a man has nothing left inside him. He said he didn't want revenge for anything. He said he didn't want money. He said he didn't want comfort. He just didn't want me to turn away. And hearing that almost snapped something in me, because 10 years ago, when I begged him not to leave me at the shelter, he didn't hesitate. 10 years ago, when I needed him, he walked away without guilt. 10 years ago, when I was shaking and lost, he chose convenience over compassion. But now the roles were reversed. And he knew it. I saw it in his face. The shame, the regret, the self-hatred. Karma had already punished him long before I saw him again. Life had crushed him down to a thin, trembling shell. He didn't need me to hurt him. Life already did. His knees gave out again, and he slid back to the ground, crying in a way that didn't sound human. It was the kind of crying that comes from a soul collapsing under the weight of its own choices. People passing by stared. My staff stood frozen, watching. The world around us kept moving, cars passing, doors opening, plates clattering inside the restaurant. But for me, time stopped. I looked at him and realized something painful. I wasn't looking at the son who abandoned me. I was looking at the broken man he became because of that decision. The collapse wasn't just his body falling to the sidewalk. The collapse was everything inside him falling apart at once. Pride, greed, arrogance, certainty, all shattered, all gone. And there he was, begging the father he once threw away to not throw him away now. And in that moment, I understood something I never expected. The man who left me to suffer was now suffering in ways I never wished on him. My staff stood behind me, confused and waiting, their eyes moving from him to me like they were watching a story unfold that none of them understood. They had only known me as the strong old man who built a restaurant from nothing. They never knew the version of me that sat in a shelter bed with a broken heart. They never knew the father who waited years for footsteps that never returned. But here we were, the past and present standing face to face on a cold sidewalk. I felt everyone around me holding their breath. Some of them expected me to kick him away. Some expected me to yell. Some expected me to walk back inside and leave him where he sat. Even he looked at me like he believed I would turn from him the same way he turned from me 10 years ago. I stared at him, shaking, dirty, humiliated, empty. And inside me, two voices fought. One voice whispered that this was justice. The life he gave me was the life he was living now. The same cold, lonely ground. The same fear of being unwanted. The same silence from people who didn't care if he lived or died. A part of me wanted to let him taste the full weight of what he made me feel. A part of me felt the satisfaction of watching him understand pain the way I had. But the other voice, the older voice, the father in me, spoke louder. It reminded me of the boy he once was. The boy who held my hand when crossing the street. The boy who cried into my chest when he was scared. The boy who depended on me before pride filled his heart and poisoned him. I looked at him and realized something cruel but true. He had already been punished enough. Life had beaten him down in ways I never wished for. He wasn't standing in front of me as the man who abandoned me. He was standing in front of me as the broken child who had finally learned that the world does not protect selfish people. And even though he never came back for me, even though he stole from me, even though he shattered my sense of worth, he was still my son. That truth hurt, but it was real. And real things don't disappear just because they bring pain. He looked at me with the kind of eyes a man has when he believes he deserves nothing. He whispered that he understood if I turned away. He said he knew he had no right to ask for help. He said he wouldn't blame me if I walked back inside and left him on the street the way he left me at the shelter. Hearing him say that made something inside me soften and harden at the same time soft, because he was finally understanding the damage he caused. Hard, because he had let things go so far that we reached this moment. I took a slow breath. My staff watched every move. People walking by stopped and stared. My son kept his head down, waiting for a punishment he already carried inside him. I stepped closer. He flinched like he expected a kick. But instead, I told him quietly to get up. His head jerked up in disbelief. Tears were already running down his cheeks, but when he heard my voice, they fell faster. He tried to stand, but his legs gave out again. I reached my hand out, not out of comfort, not out of forgiveness, but out of humanity. Because no matter how much he hurt me, I would not become like him. I would not throw away my own blood on the street. He grabbed my arm with weak fingers, trembling as he pulled himself up. He leaned on me like the weight of his sins was pressing on his shoulders. No words passed between us. No apology, no forgiveness, no explanations. Just the simple truth. He needed help, and I was choosing to give it. Not because he earned it. Not because he deserved it. But because my heart, even after everything, was still a father's heart. I guided him inside as my staff stepped aside, some shocked, some moved, some struggling to understand. But they didn't need to understand. This moment wasn't for them. It was for me. It was for the years I spent alone. It was for the man I became through pain. It was for the chance to do what he couldn't do for me. And as he crossed the doorway he once thought he'd never enter, I realized something important. I didn't choose him. I chose the person I wanted to be. A man who does not repay cruelty with cruelty. A man who knows the difference between justice and revenge. A man who still had love left, even after everything was taken from him. Inside the restaurant, I led him to a corner table where nobody else sat. He lowered himself into the chair like every bone in his body hurt. His hands shook non-stop, and he kept rubbing them together like he was trying to warm a life that had already frozen. My staff watched from a distance, whispering, confused, curious. They didn't know the story, and I didn't owe it to them. I brought him a cup of warm water, and when he held it, his fingers were trembling so badly that half of it spilled on the table. He muttered an apology under his breath, but his voice was so weak I almost didn't hear it. For a long moment, he just stared at the cup like he wasn't sure if he deserved to drink it. And then, slowly, he began to talk. He told me everything. Not all at once, but in pieces, with long pauses in between, as if each truth was a stone he had to lift from his chest. He said after he left me at the shelter, he felt relief, like he finally had space. He said he took my savings because he thought he earned it after looking after me when I got older. He said he took the house because he believed I wouldn't need it anymore. He said I was slowing down his life. Hearing those words again stung like fresh wounds opening. He said that at first he felt powerful. He lived big. He spent big. He acted like a man who had everything under control. But the world doesn't protect people like him. He said the job he bragged about lost him during a company cut. He said his girlfriend left the moment the money stopped flowing. He said his friends vanished when he could no longer treat them. Everything he built from the pieces he stole from me crumbled faster than he expected. He admitted he tried to get another job, but no one wanted to hire someone who acted entitled for so long. His old habits destroyed every chance he had. He said he became angry at everyone, at life, at strangers, at himself, but never at me. Because deep down, he knew what he did to me was wrong. He said he used to lie awake at night in his apartment, thinking of the day he left me at the shelter, wondering if maybe I died there. He said he wanted to call me, but his pride wouldn't let him. He said he wanted to come find me, but shame held him down like chains. And then the apartment was gone. The savings were gone. The food was gone. And he ended up on the street, going from place to place, sleeping in corners, surviving on whatever he could find. He cried when he said it. Real tears. The kind he never shed when he abandoned me. He covered his face with his hands and shook as he said he saw my restaurant weeks ago, but couldn't bring himself to come in. He said seeing my name on the sign told him the truth he didn't want to face. I survived without him. I rose without him. I became more without him than I ever was with him. He said that broke him more than losing his home. He said he realized then that the father he threw away didn't just live. He thrived. He told me he came to my door yesterday not to beg for money, not to ask for a place to stay, but because he had nowhere left to hide. He said he knew I might spit on him, shout at him, push him away, but he couldn't keep living without at least trying to face the man he wronged most. He said he had spent years believing he didn't need me, but now he understood something cruel. I was the only person left in this world who might show him mercy. Every word cut into me, deeper than the years I spent in the shelter. It hurt to hear his honesty because it came too late. It hurt because the truth he carried now was the truth he should have carried years ago. It hurt because I could see the man he became and the man he destroyed himself trying to be. He said he didn't expect forgiveness. He said he didn't expect love. He said he only wanted a chance to make things right in whatever small way he could. I sat across from him with a heart full of pain, not for the past, but for the broken man trembling in front of me. He wasn't the son who abandoned me. He was the man life had taught a lesson he could never forget. And hearing him confess everything didn't heal me, but it opened a door I thought was locked forever. He kept begging, his voice cracking every few words, asking me not to turn him away. He said he would sleep in the kitchen, on the floor, in the storage room, anywhere he said he would work for free. He said he would do anything just to not be alone another night. His eyes were swollen, red, desperate. I could tell he thought this was the moment where I would pick him up, hug him, tell him everything was forgiven. He believed that because that's how he remembered me. Soft, patient, always sacrificing myself for him. But I wasn't the same man he abandoned 10 years ago. The shelter changed me. Poverty changed me. The long nights alone changed me. The rise changed me. And now I understood something he never learned. Mercy is not the same as weakness. I looked at him and saw a man drowning, but I also saw the same man who once watched me beg him not to leave me behind. The same man who took everything I had. The same man who lived in comfort while I slept in a bed that smelled like despair. If I opened my arms now and gave him everything he asked for, he would learn nothing. He would fall into comfort again, slip back into his old habits, and forget the lesson life had carved into him. Helping him too quickly would not lift him. It would ruin him all over again. So I stayed silent for a long moment and watched him crumble under the weight of waiting for my answer. When I finally spoke, he leaned forward like he expected me to tell him to move in with me, to sit at my table, to be my son again without question. But I didn't offer him comfort. I offered him something far harder. I told him he would not sleep in my home. I told him he would not receive special treatment. I told him nothing in my restaurant was free, not even for him. His face fell, confusion turning into panic. He asked if I was rejecting him. He asked if I was punishing him. He asked if this was revenge, but it wasn't. It was reality. The reality he had run from for years. I explained that life gave him consequences, not because the world hated him, but because he needed to be broken in order to understand the pain he caused. I told him I couldn't hand him back a life he destroyed with his own choices. I couldn't give him comfort he didn't earn. I couldn't let him skip the work of rebuilding himself. He hung his head, shoulders shaking, tears dropping onto the table. He whispered that he understood, even though it hurt him. He whispered that he would take any chance, even the smallest one. So I offered him exactly that, a chance, not a rescue. I told him he could work in my restaurant, but not as my son, as a dishwasher. The same place I started when he left me with nothing. No privileges, no quick forgiveness, no easy path. Just work, hard work, real work, the kind that humbles a man and rebuilds him 1 hour at a time. For a moment, he didn't respond. Then slowly, he nodded. Not with excitement, not with relief, but with acceptance. Acceptance that this was the only road left for him. Acceptance that he had to earn his way back, step by painful step. I told him he would be paid like everyone else. He would eat like everyone else. He would follow rules like everyone else. If he was late, he would be sent home. If he disrespected anyone, he would be fired. If he expected special treatment, he would lose the chance. He nodded again, more tears falling, but this time they weren't from fear. They were from understanding. He finally understood that love wasn't a free meal. Respect wasn't automatic. Family wasn't a shield against consequences. He had to work for everything now. Then I said one more thing, something he didn't expect. I told him this was not punishment. This was mercy. The kind of mercy that forces a man to grow. The kind that lifts him, not by giving him comfort, but by giving him responsibility. He stared at me like he didn't know whether to cry harder or thank me. But I didn't need his thanks. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need him to love me again. This wasn't about him earning my forgiveness. This was about him earning himself back from the ruins of his own mistakes. And that was my judgment, not revenge, not rejection. A chance, painful, difficult, humbling, to rebuild a life he broke with his own hands. He came begging for shelter, but what I gave him instead was something far more important. A way to rise, just like I did. The next morning, he showed up before sunrise, standing by the back door like a man afraid to breathe too loudly. His clothes were still dirty, his hair still messy, but something in his eyes had changed. There was no pride left, no laziness, no excuses. Only the quiet look of someone who finally understood he had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. I watched him from inside the kitchen for a moment. He didn't see me, but I studied the way he shifted from foot to foot, nervous, unsure, humbled in a way I never thought I would witness. This was the same man who once told me I slowed him down, the same man who left me at a shelter without a second thought. And now he stood there waiting for work he never imagined he would have to do. I opened the door and let him in. He lowered his head, not out of shame alone, but out of respect, something he never gave me before. I pointed to the stacks of dirty dishes piled high from the night before. He stared at them like he was looking up a mountain he knew he had no choice but to climb. He didn't complain, he didn't hesitate. He walked to the sink, rolled up his sleeves, and began to scrub. The first few minutes were clumsy. His hands shook from hunger and exhaustion. He dropped a plate, and it cracked. He froze, expecting me to yell or punish him. I didn't. I just told him to keep going. And he did. He washed for hours, his back bent, his fingers wrinkled. The steam burned his face. The soap stung the blisters forming on his hands. The kitchen was loud, pots slamming, cooks shouting orders, customers talking on the other side of the wall, but he stayed silent, focused only on the pile in front of him. Every time I walked past, he straightened up as if waiting for judgment. Every time I said nothing, he went back to work with even more determination. It was strange, watching him like that. This was not the same son who once laughed at me for being slow. This was not the same son who called me a burden. This was not the same son who left me to struggle alone. This was a man learning humility the hard way, the only way he was willing to learn. At lunchtime, I noticed he kept glancing at the plates of food my cooks carried out. He didn't ask to eat. He didn't expect a meal. He didn't assume he had earned one. When the rush slowed down, I handed him a simple bowl, rice, soup, nothing special. He held it with both hands like it was gold. He ate slowly, quietly, savoring each bite in a way only a hungry man can. Watching him eat made my chest tight, not out of pity, but out of the memory of all the meals he enjoyed while I sat alone in the shelter eating whatever scraps were available. Life had reversed our roles in the harshest way. By evening, he could barely stand. His arms shook when he lifted another pot. His back hurt so much he had to lean on the counter between tasks. Yet he never complained. Not once. When closing time came, he stayed behind to mop the floor, even though no one asked him. When he finished, he looked at me with tired eyes waiting for my reaction. I simply nodded. A small nod. But to him, it felt like a blessing. He whispered a soft, "Thank you," not loud, not emotional, just honest. The kind of thank you that comes from a place of deep understanding. He walked out into the night with slow steps, not sure what tomorrow would bring. He had no home, no bed, no comfort waiting for him. But he had something he hadn't had in years. A beginning. Not a happy beginning. Not an easy beginning. But a real beginning. A beginning built on humility, work, effort, and reality. A beginning he had to face alone, just like I once did. I watched him disappear down the sidewalk, carrying nothing but the weight of his past and the small hope that tomorrow he could come back and try again, and for the first time in 10 years, I felt something new inside me. Not forgiveness, not relief, but the quiet feeling that maybe, just maybe, he was finally learning what it means to be a man. Now he comes to the restaurant every morning before the sun rises, standing by the back door with tired eyes and rough hands. He does not ask for comfort. He does not ask for a place to stay. He only waits for work, because work is the only stable thing he has left. And I watch him from the kitchen window before I let him in. I study the way he shifts from one foot to the other, how he pulls his thin jacket closer when the wind is cold, how he keeps his head down like a man who lost not only his life, but the version of himself he used to pretend to be. It is strange, the way time deals justice. Loud punishments break fast, but quiet punishments last forever. He washes dishes with hands that no longer look young. His shoulders slump more every day. He tries to stand straight when I walk by, but the years of mistakes weigh him down. I do not comfort him. I do not lift that weight. It is his to carry. My staff treats him like any other worker, maybe even with less patience because they do not know he is my son. They think he is just another man trying to earn a living after life crushed him. And maybe that is what he truly is now. A man trying to rebuild from the ground he once forced me to live on. Sometimes when he thinks no one is looking, he stares at me with a mixture of shame and longing. He wants forgiveness, but he is smart enough to know forgiveness is not a gift you ask for. It is a gift you earn through time. And time is slow. Time is sharp. Time is honest. He is learning that every single day. He never uses my name at work. He never calls me dad. He speaks to me like I am his boss, not his father. And maybe, for now, that is the role he needs me to be. A man who teaches through actions, not softness. A man who sets the path, not the reward. When he finishes his shift, he leaves quietly. Sometimes he sits on the curb outside the restaurant, rubbing his hands together, staring at the ground. He is not waiting for me. He is waiting for the pieces of his life to come back, but pieces do not return quickly, and the pieces he broke may never come back at all. That is the price he pays now. Not hunger, not cold, not loneliness, but the slow understanding of what he threw away. Life did not punish him with a single blow. Life punished him with the truth. And I watch him not with anger, but with a father's heavy heart. I remember the shelter nights when I believed the world had forgotten me. I remember the mornings when I swept floors and washed dishes just like he does now. I remember the sting of shame, the weight of survival, the slow rebuilding of a life that seemed too broken to repair. And maybe that is why I do not push him away. Not because he deserves grace, but because I know what it feels like to start again with nothing. I know what it feels like when the world gives you one more chance that you do not deserve. He has a long road ahead, a road without shortcuts, a road without comfort, a road where he must face the mirror he spent years avoiding. But the truth is simple. Justice did not come from me. Justice came from time. Time took everything he used to value. Time took his pride. Time took his comfort. Time took his excuses. Time left him with only one thing: the chance to become a man he should have been long ago. And as I close the restaurant each night, I look at the empty sink he scrubbed clean, the floor he mopped, the quiet space he worked in. And I think to myself, not with anger, not with joy, but with a tired kind of peace. He left me at a shelter, but life placed him at my door. I did not punish him. Time did.